Welcome to Showdown. I'm Mark Kaysen, and it's about 4 minutes late. You know, things happen. This is luckily not broadcast radio, or else it would be a problem. Although I know how to handle that as well. I call from the car and just walk in on the phone. It doesn't matter. Here I am, 4:04 on a Monday, October 7th, with 28 days until the election. And if you don't realize how short 28 days is, I don't even know what to tell you, because 28 days is like the snap of a finger. It's nothing. And it will be here in a moment, and we will then deposit Donald J. Trump on the trash heap of history, where he belongs, with Joe McCarthy, twins, if I've ever seen them, in a lot of ways, actually. Anyway, Donald, of course, has gone crazy this weekend because that's all he ever does. A lot of people think it's because he's desperate, and I think that's probably a rational conclusion to draw from his behavior. Desperation. Now, having said that, I'd be a little careful because he's so seriously, mentally ill that he is perfectly capable of saying things against his best interests, even if he is in better shape than everybody knows he is. So we won't attach too much to that, except for to say this weekend, he was pretty much like he is every weekend, acting insane. But in his case, apparently it's not acting. Well, let me talk about what everybody seems to be starting their broadcasts off with today. And in my case, I can do it in a way that's maybe a little different than some others. And that's because all the Jewish talk today is often being provided by people who aren't Jewish, which is fine. They're being very respectful and very thoughtful, and it's absolutely appreciated. But let me also add that as somebody who is Jewish, I think I've got a little bit of a different way of looking at what's happening right now than many of my Jewish friends. I heard, for example, this afternoon, Donnie Deutsch over on MSNBC talking about the great pain that he has today as a Jewish person. And you know, if we're talking about the people who have been taken away from their homes and are currently underground somewhere, and you know how fearful they must be, they are undoubtedly hysterical. I would think. I would be. And I don't know what. I don't see any other possible way of responding to what's going on, except for the fact that if it's day in and day out, perhaps the hysteria gets tamped down somewhat by just the nauseousness, you know, being nauseated by having been whisked away by some crazy Palestinians. Yeah. I can't even speak to it. I've never been in a situation as frightening as what they've gone through. So just like most of us, I mean, I can just guess. I know that the day that this happened, I was certainly crushed for the families. And really for the families, I still am. But, you start to feel a little different day after day in regard to the shock, because it's horrific and it's no less horrific, but the shock is less over time because you think about it, you realize it, you recognize it. I guess if it's your children, the shock may be the same, it may be worse. I don't know. I mean, how do you measure? I can't say better or worse. I can only say this. Jews have been murdered in that area since 1948. So for 76 years, this killing has continued day after day. I've often wondered, how can Jews want to even be there under the circumstances, knowing what they're subjecting themselves to? And yet, I have family that's been there, and I talk to them. I hear what they have to say, and they're not as fearful as maybe we would think they should be. I don't know how to judge that either. I'm not a psychologist. But I know this much. In 76 years, every time that somebody has tried to kill Jews, the Jews have done the same thing. They've pushed back. They've hurt people intentionally. I mean, they've tried to convince these people that if you don't stop, you're going to be hurt so badly that it's just not going to be worth it. And every single time that that's been done, the subsequent behavior has been every bit as bad. It's always the same thing. Let's kill some Jews. No matter that by doing it, they're sort of signing their own death warrants. And they still do it. Now, I have said for years, and I mean for years, that there's only one solution over there, and that is to have a Palestinian state where Palestinians are treated respectfully, decently, with care, with just the same belief in humanity that you would have for any other group. Despite their hate for Jews, despite their desire for, this river to the sea business, despite all of that lunacy, which can never happen, by the way, can't happen. I mean, for a very simple reason. Jews can't lose in the Middle East. First of all, they've got nuclear weapons, which they wouldn't use unless you push them all the way to the far edge and force them to do it. But they don't want to do that. And they know the consequences that would come back down on them. They're not dumb. Not by far. They're not dumb. So they can't lose. I mean, they could be part of a complete destruction of the entire Middle East and possibly the entire planet. That they could be part of. But they couldn't just by themselves lose. So that's one way of looking at it. But see, they lose every time when they keep pushing back so hard that they set up the next round of killing. And that's what needs to stop. the Jewish people in Israel have to recognize not just that Palestinians have the right to the same kind of decent existence that Israelis have, but that everybody has a right to it. Now, I would say as Jews, they understand the everybody part, but they probably aren't all on board with the Palestinians having those rights, for the simple reason that the Palestinians keep coming back and asking for more death and destruction. It's very sad, but they do. But the fact that they keep coming back may not just be their fault. I think that the Jewish people need to look at the possibility that it may also be our fault. Despite the fact that if everybody stopped right now with the killing, the Jews wouldn't kill anybody else outside of Israel. I mean, somebody might have an argument and kill each other. I don't know. But aside from that kind of thing, I mean, the Jews, Israel, is not looking to kill people. They don't have grudges against anybody. What they want is peace and quiet, and they would accept it. They would take it if they could get it. I think the problem is that they do make a mistake in thinking that this business having to do with retribution can somehow lead to a different result than what we've got. Because I have to say, Israelis have gotten retribution after every insane attack by every one of the countries in the Middle East that's ever wanted to destroy Israel. They have always gotten their share of retribution. They pay back pretty well. We've seen it recently. You know, they'll blow you up with a pager. They'll blow you up with your walkie-talkie. You know, they've come up with all kinds of things to push back against people who want to destroy Israel. But see, it doesn't deliver the message that we want it to deliver. What we're hoping for is that if we do these people in one more time, that they'll look back and say, you know, enough's enough. Not even Egypt has done that. Egypt has stopped fighting. But to get them to stop fighting, we had to pay them. And we paid them enough to make it worth their while. And they have stopped. Egypt does not do this anymore. Killing Egypt did not stop Egypt. Paying Egypt stopped Egypt. We paid them enough. $1 billion a year. And Egypt said, yep, we'll take that. No more for us. You all go do it. But as for Egyptians, we're going to take our billion and we're going to let it sit there. That's it. 1 year goes by, we have $1 billion. Another year goes by, we have another $1 billion. Every year, Egypt gets $1 billion. 40 years, $40 billion. But here's the thing. Before anybody gets crazy and says, oh my God, what a waste of $40 billion. Well, first of all, it's not a waste. It saved lives. And the second thing is, it's so much less than we spend to fight a war that we're also saving enormous amounts of money. That billion is a great $1 billion spent. And you know, my favorite thing to say is this. If we could give billions of dollars to the people who heiled Hitler, and we did that, Cordell Hull and George Marshall and Franklin Roosevelt and Harry Truman, I mean, that's what they came up with. They looked at World War I and they said, we punished the hell out of Germany. We taught them a lesson that they would never forget. And we sort of did. But when they didn't forget it, what they remembered was a little bit different than what we wanted them to remember. Because they remembered the same thing that everybody else thinks about. How can we get retribution? Well, Hitler came up with an idea as to how he could get retribution, and he pushed it for 12 years until he finally found out where it would lead him. And before he got hung, he pulled out a gun and blew his brains out. That was a smart move on his part because we weren't going to be nice to Adolf. We were going to teach him a lesson. But you see, that hanging business, it worked in a way for some of those Nazis that we wanted to feel better about. But on the other hand, what really worked with the Nazis was paying them. And we paid big. We rebuilt their society from the ground up, and we turned it into a democracy. I mean, we didn't even intentionally do that. I mean, we wanted that to happen, but there wasn't a plan for making them a democracy. The plan was to restore their lives, and we did that. And Germany doesn't bother anybody anymore. They stopped. They're friends with Israel. They're friends with us. It worked. So now, look at the Middle East. Some people I know say it won't work with the Arabs. It won't work with the Islamic Arabs. They say that won't work because they say that, and this is what they say. I can't tell you what the words are. They say that in the Quran, it tells them that if they have to wait 1 billion years, they'll get us. So these people I know say, just keep killing them because nothing will stop them. No amount of money, no amount of care, no amount of dignity, no amount of respect. It won't work. I disagree. I'd say no. That's not the answer. Killing them isn't the answer. Essentially, paying them is the answer. Now, here's something, and I don't know who this is, a new person, Ed Jr. Trump did have peace in the Middle East. Let me tell you something. Trump never had anything, ever, anywhere. Any peace that Trump had in the Middle East existed separate from Trump. He went to the Saudis, made a deal, just like some of the other deals that we've made. Money deals, really. The Saudis thought that they were going to get something, and they really have. They've gotten things from the United States, and that's all fine. But you see, it was all transactional, which it always is with Trump. You get a little transaction between the Saudis and Trump, which really that's what it was, because the Saudis gave money to Jared. I don't know how much they love the United States. We haven't really tested it, and I don't really want to. I think that we were on the verge of making a deal with the Saudis and with others. I don't know what it would have looked like, but I know that what happened for sure, and this is absolutely for sure, is that the deal with the Saudis was transactional with the understanding that Iran would be isolated. And that's bad. That is really bad. Yes, anything that happens that's right with Trump is a coincidence. Yes. No, that's not true. Yeah, Ed Jr. says Trump was the only president in 50 years to not start a new war. First of all, well, sure. If you're owned by the people that we would normally fight, and if you're taking money from the people who are our enemies, well, that's no problem. Yes, he was definitely the equivalent of Benedict Arnold, and I always have called him Benedict Donald. No, I'm very serious about this, Ed. This is a man who is owned still by Vladimir Putin. And so that's correct. He did not start a war with the Russians because he's owned by the Russians. He did everything he could to undermine the safety of Ukraine because he's owned by the Russians. And how do I know that? Well, simple answer, Ed. Just go back on Google and look at the pictures in the White House, in the Oval Office, of the Russians and Donald high-fiving each other while Donald was turning over documents that were secret documents to the Russians with no Americans in the room, and the only record of any of this coming from Russian photographers. We got those pictures. You can see them on Google. So, is it a coincidence? Maybe there's a better way of looking at it. Maybe it's not coincidental at all. Maybe it's just because Donald is owned by these people. He is owned by dictators. He is owned by killers. And if they tell him to kill, he'll kill. Whatever they tell him to do, he'll do. And yes, he's on the verge of killing people right now. He wants to kill Joe Biden, who, by the way, he says tried to kill him. You think Joe Biden tried to kill him? We'll get on that in a second. I'm not done with the Jewish part. But I did want to address you because let me say this. No, I'm not leaving my bias at the door. My bias is right here. And just because I'm biased doesn't mean I'm not right. A bias can be correct. I mean, for example, in the United States, I am biased in favor of black people because I know what this country has done against black people for hundreds of years. And I have a bias in their direction, in their favor, because I'm tired of seeing this country, which claims to be so wonderful when it comes to civil rights, mistreating, firstly, black people, which they still do, and secondly, people who come from other countries, which is part of this insane hatred that we have for non-white Americans. And we do have that hatred. This is a hating country. When I was 14 years old, and my friends and I were in high school, and we used to say the Pledge of Allegiance, they would make us, which they weren't really allowed to do, but we went along because they made us. And we always ended it by saying something that really got them very angry. They were better off not hearing us because we always said, with liberty and justice for all of those who are white, because that's what it is in America. Freedom for non-minorities. That's America. Yeah, I'm looking through a biased lens, which I happen to think is a correct lens, because I believe in protecting the weak. And our country hates the weak. We crush the weak. We do. We've done it forever. We need to stop. And let me say that is part of the pride that I have in being Jewish. Because, there's a Jewish phrase, and the phrase is Tikkun Olam. And believe me, I'm no Jewish expert. I love being Jewish, but I just don't know what a lot of people know. But I know that much, Tikkun Olam, and here's what it means. Repair the world. And believe me, Jewish people are dedicated to that. They know what it means. You go to any Jewish person and say that. They know exactly what it means, and they're not kidding. That's why Donald's freaked out, because 80% of Jews vote against him and vote against Republicans all the time. But certainly they vote against him. They vote against him because Jewish people know better. Believe me, I wouldn't be proud of Jews if they voted against black people, or they voted against Hispanics, or they voted against LGBTQ. If they voted against that, I would be upset as well. But see, it's not like that. There are no judgments that way. Let me assure you that when the Nazis marched in Skokie, Illinois, back in the 1980s, it was Jewish lawyers who rushed to protect the rights of the Nazis. Let's see. Kamala did not pick Shapiro because he was Jewish. You know something, Ed? I'm not angry with you, and I'm not going to say anything bad about you, but I feel sorry for you. And the reason I feel sorry for you is because you believe all that MAGA lunacy. You just believe it. Maybe you better listen to what Kamala and her husband did today at the residence of the vice presidency. If you listen to what they did today, not only the planting of the tree, but the words that came with it, you will understand Kamala is not running away from her Jewishness. And trust me, there are black Jews. That's number one. But see, here's what happens. You come into a family like that, and typically the non-Jewish member of the family becomes the one that drives the whole family in the direction of supporting their Jewishness. And if you hear what she said, you will know that she did not reject Shapiro because he was Jewish. She picked Tim Walz because they believe, and I hope they're right, that they're going to get enough support out of Pennsylvania to win, and that Walz will help them in both Michigan and in Wisconsin. So that's what's going on there. This is not because Shapiro was Jewish. Not at all. If that were the case, they'd have run away from this so fast and so far today, but they did not. And they won't. Because I can tell you right now, Kamala Harris is not just a very smart lady, which she is, and not just a very smart black lady, which she is, and not just a brilliant political person, which she has showed herself to be, but she's also somebody who has inspired just unbelievable numbers of people in this election and is now moving this country in a direction which she will continue, I'm sure, once she's elected. And she will be elected because she's going to have the votes. And if you don't believe that, start listening to what Republicans are saying. They are running away as fast as they can from Donald Trump. Ed says, you want to see Nazis? Look on every college campus. No, stop. See, that's the sickness. That's the sickness of MAGA. College campuses are Nazis. No. Those are young people who are, in many ways, grappling with very difficult moral questions, not just in our time, but in all time. That's what young people do. And they're smart to do it. They should do it. And it really does a lot of good for them in the long run. And let me assure you that the people at the lead of a lot of this moral dilemma discussion business, a lot of them are Jewish professors. A lot of them are Jewish professors who I know very well. So, I know Donald says things that you believe, but I think you have to understand something. However many years that you spent in college, I'm going to assume that maybe you spent some, you better double it. You better triple it. And I hope you didn't go to Liberty University because, yeah, that's a problem in itself. But let me say that truly, you've got a MAGA problem. And I'm not sure how that MAGA problem is going to resolve when all of this ends. I'm not sure. But I know this, that MAGA's hatred for black people, for Haitian people like you're throwing up here right now, Jamaicans, you don't like them. Elon Musk is black, right? Honestly, I'm telling you, your MAGA problems are so apparent. And anybody that can come in and read all of this that you're putting on here, you're welcome. You could come here and do it all day long. I'd never want to get rid of it. I'd never stop you. I'd always respond. And when you're decent, I'd respond with, a decent comment about it. But, we all listened this weekend. I'm going to switch off the Jewish thing now, only because I think I've said what I really need to say from the standpoint of how proud I am to be Jewish, because I am. But let me move on to some other things. For example, it wasn't enough for Donald to lie about the Haitians eating dogs and cats. And, you get on there and you listen to him. They're eating the dogs. Yeah, that's what he did. Very, very sick stuff. But how about this? FEMA has diverted all of its money, and he didn't say some of it, all of its money to illegal migrants. That's what Donald says. All of that money has gone to illegal migrants. And then he said that there were some $750 payments that were made to people who were hurt in the hurricane, and that the rest of the money was going elsewhere. But of course, this weekend we heard the FEMA people, the people that run FEMA, all the top government people, they all stepped in and they said, look, Donald's lying. And by the way, governors from these states saying the same thing. Donald's lying. The $750, that's all just a first payment. And that there's a much higher number, dramatically higher number, that is owed to these families. That if they get in trouble, the money keeps coming up until this limit, which is very high, way up in the thousands. And the thing is that not only did FEMA do a terrific job with regard to Hurricane Helene, but FEMA's on the ground right now, 100% prepared, waiting in advance for Milton. They are so ready to handle what's coming, not only in order to try to protect lives, which is first and foremost, But behind that, with money to help the families that are destroyed, where their belongings are wiped out, where their homes are gone, they have nothing left in the world, the United States government is there to protect them. And the governors of every one of these states, including the Republicans, are saying the same thing, that the federal government is prepared. They are there. They are ready to provide whatever support is needed for these people. We just are. And anybody that knows Joe Biden would know that he would go to any extreme to be certain that everybody is protected over there. He's just that way. It's just the way he is about families. It's just the way he is about people. He's a caring guy. And he's just going to make sure that everything is done right. And then, of course, he's doing it in a way that yes, it makes Kamala look good at the same time. Now, Donald says that Kamala and Joe Biden are destroying FEMA and turning the money over to illegal migrants. If you want to believe that, believe what you want. And the sad part is there are Republicans, not the ones I've been talking about, who are switching right now in giant numbers to Kamala, but there are Republicans who are trying to hold on to their jobs. And out of that very sick reasoning, they have joined Trump on the airwaves lying as well. Senator Tom Cotton was on this weekend on the political shows, and he lied every inch of the way. Lied about FEMA, lied about Jack Smith, lied about every bit of it. How do I know it's a lie? Because I know where to look to find information, and it was a lie. Every last bit of it. All these people saying that our elections are not free, that they're not fair, that when they're over and when Donald loses, that we need to have a civil war. That comes out of Fox News. Fox is pushing now this civil war idea. This is all MAGA. This is all sickness. And believe me, anybody who thinks that a civil war would end any way but crushing the MAGA people, come on. They're not going to win. They're not going to secede from the Union. They're not going to get any of that lunacy. It's all craziness. And Ed, when I see you on here saying Kamala ain't black, it's all I got to hear. It's all I got to know. Kamala's not black. Okay. Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, was on these political shows this weekend, and they asked, are you going to do the same as J.D. Vance? Are you going to refuse to answer who won the election? Guess what? Very simple. Very simple. They won't answer. They won't answer. Who won 2020? They won't answer. Will everybody agree to a peaceful transfer of power? No. Absolutely not. They won't. They say it depends if Donald gets what he wants, which of course means that Donald has to win. But they won't even admit that Biden won. You know what they say? They say Biden is the president right now. We admit that. Well, I guess you ought to. He's the guy who stands up in front of the little seal that says President of the United States. So I guess he is the president. The question is, how did he get there? Well, let me tell you how he got there. He was elected. And let me tell you that he won by 7 million votes. Now, I understand our elections are in the Electoral College, so he won by a sliver in those states that were battleground states. But beyond that, there was a 7 million vote advantage, which tells you this. It went from 3 million, which is what Hillary had. That was her advantage in 2016. It went to 7 million in 2020. And I'm telling you right now, it'll probably be 15 million in 28 days. And I can say with absolute certainty, if she wins by 15 million votes, the Electoral College will not be a problem. I think there are a lot of Republicans who do not want to say, I'm voting for Kamala Harris. They don't want to say it. It's just like what happened with Donald Trump. They didn't want to admit that they were going to vote for Trump. And even then, in both of those elections, Trump was destroyed. 3 million in 2016, 7 million in 2020. You wait for this one. It'll be more than 7. And believe me, Republicans, obviously not the people who think they're going to lose their jobs, except for Liz Cheney, who didn't care. She didn't care. And is she going to come out of this okay? Probably so. I would bet anything that the Democrats give her a job in the Democratic administration. I am sure of it. And I hope they do. What a great lady she has proven to be. I don't know about her father. Her father's obviously going to vote for Kamala too. He's announced it. But I've heard her. And I know the answer. And all this talk about, oh, she's Indian, she's Irish, she's this. Let me tell you something. They said the same thing about Barack Obama. Barack Obama's a black man. Kamala Harris is a black woman. You know, if we had slavery today, they'd be hanging both of them. So trust me, they're black. And by the way, before I go to my business here, let me throw this in. This is part of the sickness. This is one of the saddest parts of the sickness, and it shows you how horrible this whole situation has become. Jimmy Carter had his 100th birthday. And what happened? 4 presidents, George Bush, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama. Who did I leave out? Certainly Joe Biden, but I'm talking about ex-presidents. But anyway, 4 presidents supported Jimmy Carter with a birthday wish. Not Donald Trump. Donald Trump couldn't even say, happy birthday, Jimmy Carter. That's how horrible this situation has become. It's pretty sad. Okay, I'll tell you what you can do to feel a whole lot better. It'll solve all your problems. Go straight to Wendy's, 18,000 Chesterfield Airport Road, and I promise you, you will have a great dinner, and you won't have to deal with any of the lunacy. All you'll deal with is just plain, good, great food. They've got wings. They've got smoked meats. They've got hamburgers, cheeseburgers, patty melts. They've got great salads. I love their drinks. Their drinks are really good. They've got great pizza. But for me, it's the baby back ribs and it's the onion rings. That's where I go every time when it comes to Wendy's. And you make your choice. You can do it any way you want. You know, like they say, it's still a free country for the moment. So enjoy Wendy's. And then when you want more Wendy's, but you don't want to look like you eat too much, just go down the road to Wendy's in Defiance, and they'll never know that you pigged out at the other Wendy's, and you'll just keep eating. $29.99, South Highway 94. Ben and his wife have done a great job putting together a great restaurant. You'll love it. That's Wendy's. Now, you go to 4506 Hampton. That's Jewels on Hampton. And believe me, you'll love the jewelry. Cases of jewelry all through this gigantic space. I mean, they've just got jewelry everywhere. And believe me, not only is it good merchandise, but on top of that, beautiful designs. And if you want your jewelry designed in some other creative way besides what they have there, you've got people there that are prepared to do it for you. Al is just, he's got a great business. It's a great jewelry store. Everybody loves it. It's more than just a jewelry store. You know, they buy and sell jewelry and coins. And then when it comes to your watches, you know, I love my 45-year-old gold Seiko, and you can get them all fixed at Jewels on Hampton. It's just a great place to do all business having to do with jewelry and coins. And plus, like I say, Al's just a great person. You'll enjoy just meeting Al. Go to 4506 Hampton. That is Jewels on Hampton. If you want great clothing, men's clothing, you go to St. Louis Suit Company. It's in Clayton, and they have been there for 30 years. They've got suits. They've got shoes. They've got ties for $5. It's crazy. But they're nice ties. They're silk ties with great designs. Everybody who sees those ties says, where's that place? I need to go there. And they do, because those ties are terrific. Inexpensive, but really top quality. You will love the ties at the St. Louis Suit Company. If you'd see how many ties I had, you'd just be laughing, because I have more ties than I can wear in a lifetime. I give them away all the time. And I bought them, but you know, I give them away. I give them to students. I give them all over the place. They're great. It's St. Louis Suit Company, and they've got overcoats. You know, it's cold out. I'm telling you, it is cold in the morning. Right now, no. But in the morning, yeah, in the 40s, that's cold enough. Cold enough to get yourself an overcoat. They've got shoes as well. They've got hats. They've got everything. St. Louis Suit Company in Clayton, Forsyth and Central. You'll love Jay and Nick and the whole family. And they've been there 30 years. But, you know, while 30 years is great, that's a terrific record. It's not 40. And if you go to Telena's, they've been there 40 years. Run by Medi. And believe me, Medi runs a great Italian restaurant. The Italian food is terrific. The only problem I have with it, so I've just got to be careful because I don't like gaining weight. But, you know, I caved in on Friday and I actually had spaghetti and meatballs. That's why the people always said on Friday, that's spaghetti and meatballs day at Telena's, at least for Showdown it is. And I can tell you, that spaghetti and meatballs is the best. Now, they've got everything else Italian that you can imagine. Just go there. You try it. It's very good. And you know, I got to tell you, Medi, he knows what he's doing when it comes to running an Italian restaurant for 40 years. So if you think 30 years is good, let me tell you, 40 years is good. That's Telena's. It's in Creve Coeur on the corner in there of 141 and Olive, not exactly, but 141 and Olive. They got a big shopping center there. You just go inside. You'll see Telena's. It's right there next to Deerberg's. Great food. You'll love Telena's. Okay, here's one for you. This is a good one for my friends who have joined me today on the chat. Talk about how brainwashed I am and all that. Yeah, that's okay, Ed. Believe me, I handle these. I take it well. I really do. But let me say this. How could I not take it well? Knowing, listen, 54, this is a new poll. Now, actually, I heard it last week, but it's relatively new. 54% of MAGA people say that Putin is the greatest leader in the world. 18% of MAGA, I'm surprised it could be that high, say good things about Joe Biden. But 54% of MAGA is with Putin, Vladimir Putin. And I'm not talking about it from the standpoint of communism or any of that. I mean, we just know Putin's a killer. He kills journalists. He kills his opponents in elections, which, remember, that's what Donald wants. Donald's lawyers told the Supreme Court that Donald has the right to use SEAL Team 6 to kill his political opponents. And when they asked, really? Is that what you're saying? They said, yep, that's what we're saying. SEAL Team 6 can kill their opponents. You know, Joe Biden's been in for 4 years. He hasn't killed any of his opponents. Now, I know that there are people who say, and in fact, Donald said this weekend that Joe Biden is trying to kill him. The Democrats are trying to kill him. And in fact, his brilliant son, Eric, said that it's just more evidence that Democrats are incompetent because they couldn't even get the job done. What sickness this country is dealing with. It is unbelievable. And how about the threats to poll workers? All weekend, poll workers were being interviewed and talking about what they've dealt with in terms of the threats that they've received. And of course, that included coming from Raffensperger from Georgia, who tells it all the time, the kind of threats that he not only dealt with then, but is dealing with now, because MAGA just won't leave it alone. They think that Donald won in Georgia because Donald says that he won. And whatever Donald says, these people believe, like they're eating the dogs. Oh my God. It's just unbelievable. It just never ends. But, I just think that the refusal by Donald to even say happy birthday to Jimmy Carter, I mean, it's just a perfect example of how mentally ill the man is. I mean, nobody would say, what a terrible thing. If he said happy birthday, Jimmy Carter, nobody would say, gee, there's something terrible in Donald. We better vote for somebody else. No, they'd say, okay, he did what anybody would do. Another president, an ex-president, 100-year-old ex-president. You can't say happy birthday? Unbelievable. Here's one from DRC. Hey, Mark, do you get Medicare? Misappropriation of funds from Medicare to EV green junk plan. Your rates are getting ready to go way up. You know, here's the thing. I'm happy to pay whatever rates are necessary for whatever I get from the government, because I have a giant trust and love for the United States government, and I always have. Now, I have to tell you that while I trusted the United States government, I certainly opposed Lyndon Johnson. I definitely did. And I opposed him because he promised that we would never fight a war in Southeast Asia. And the second he became president, he was so fearful that he would be branded as weak on communism that he killed 58,000 Americans in Vietnam. And so, no, I never forgave him for that. A lot of people said, well, look what he did with civil rights. Look what he did, for voting rights for black people. He had always been a racist. He was a Texas Southern racist. Well, he had to be in order to get elected. People always said that. But you know what? He didn't have to get elected. He didn't have to stay in Texas. He didn't have to do any of it, but he did. He said things that were horrible when he was in Texas. But when he got to be president, he got off that. He saw what was popular in our dead ex-president, and that was civil rights. And he jumped on board. He took a hold of it, and he did the right thing. But at the same time, he killed 58,000 Americans in Vietnam. And I couldn't get past that. But, if you think that the government is taking money from Medicare and giving it to migrants, first of all, they're not. Secondly, if you think they're taking Social Security and giving it to migrants, let me say, they're not. Migrants don't get Social Security. Migrants don't get Medicare. They don't get money from those funds. This is all MAGA sickness. It's the same MAGA sickness that says, trust Vladimir Putin, despise Joe Biden. And, remember this. When Donald was at that big international event way back at the beginning of his presidency, and he was asked, who do you trust? Because he had been meeting with Vladimir Putin, and there was this question of whether our U.S. intelligence people were telling the truth, or was Putin telling the truth? The answer was, of course, that our U.S. intelligence people were the honest ones. Putin was lying. But here's the thing. Donald said he had no reason to believe that Putin would lie. And let me say, if you read, which I'm sure you may not be able to read, which is why you're saying some of the things that you're saying here, but if you were able to read, and you would read the Mueller report, and I know it's 448 pages, that's awful long for somebody that's MAGA, but I mean, Donald doesn't even read himself, except for the speeches of Hitler and Mein Kampf, which, again, if you don't believe he's a Nazi, listen to his ex-wife. She says he's a Nazi. She says he reads those speeches at night before he goes to sleep. And then to top it all off, just go look at whatever that thing is he's got where he posts stuff. And what did he post? That when he's elected, it will be the unified Reich. And I think I'll end on that one because Adolf Trumpler is not going to win. But here's what is a winner. Wendy's is a winner. Jules on Hampton's a winner. St. Louis Suit Company is a winner. And Telena's as well. All winners. This is Showdown. I'm Mark